Hey fellow hop killers, it's Dylan here with the Hop Killer Brewery. We're bringing the brews, reviews, and how-tos. And in this video, we're going to do a grain to glass of a Hazy Double IPA. Hazy IPA is near and dear to my heart, one of the beers that really solidified me getting into craft beer and homebrewing to begin with. I've always brewed Hazy IPAs since the beginning of my homebrewing career, and this is surprisingly the first Hazy Double IPA I've purposely brewed. We're gonna break into the entire recipe, give you my tasting from aroma, tasting, mouthfeel, and note to kind of go over the entire process from what you just saw on the brew day. The entire recipe will be available down in the description below. And if you can't get enough of me here on YouTube, make sure you follow me on Instagram and TikTok. I pump out a bunch of content there as well. This was 6.9 gallons of RO water. I used 6 grams of calcium chloride, 6 milliliters of lactic acid, 2 grams of Epsom, and 1 gram of Gypsum, all of which went into the mash. I will give you ppms in the recipe in the description. Those are just numbers that I use for my water. And the acid will vary depending on the water source that you use. In terms of the grist bill, we have 10 pounds of Rahr Pilsner malt, which is roughly 70% of this grain bill, 2 pounds of Flaked Oats, which is roughly 15% of this grain bill, and then 2 pounds of Yolo gold wheat from Admiral Maltings here in California for another 15%. I say this is like the gold standard, or what I coined to be the gold standard for hazy IPAs, with double or single, when it comes to building your malt bill or your grist bill, whatever you want to call it, is a 70% Pilsner malt, 15% Flaked Oats, 15% of some wheat variety. I prefer to use malted, and that is a really good base recipe to build on and start with if you don't already have your recipe, to give you that really light, really yellowish golden hue to your hazy IPAs, and one that stays for a while and also adds to a lot of the body and mouthfeel, which we'll discuss later. That was a 60-minute mash. I typically mash at 156 degrees Fahrenheit. For this beer, because it was a double IPA, I wanted to bring the mash temp a little lower, one, for a slightly higher attenuation, but two, because of the alcohol content. Alcohol gives body, and I wanted to dial back on the body that I was going to create in the mash by normally from mashing at a higher temperature, and dial that back to 152 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's what I did here with this beer. The boil, this was a 75-minute boil. I hit it with Mosaic, Citra, and Nelson throughout the entire beer. But at 75 minutes, we did a 1 ounce, which was 43 IBU of Mosaic. Just a side note, I would dial that back. I think I would dial that back to whatever equivalates to 25 to 30 IBUs. I did another ounce of Mosaic at 10 minutes, which was a 15 IBU addition. And I also added some yeast nutrient and 2 milliliters of lactic acid at the 10-minute mark. And that was to bring down the pH because of the hop load that will be going into this beer. Because of the efficiency of the system, my mash efficiency was around 58 to 60%. It was very terrible. I ended up adding 8 ounces of just regular table sugar in the whirlpool. That, gave it an extra bump in ABV and helped dry out the beer as well. In the whirlpool, this was a whirlpool, I dropped the temp down to 170 degrees. I hit it with 1.2 ounces of Citra, which was about 5 IBUs, 1 ounces of the Nelson, and that was about 4.2 IBUs, and then half an ounce of Mosaic for about 2 IBUs. This was in the whirlpool at 170 degrees for 20 minutes. After the whirlpool, I then used the immersion chiller sent to me by Accelerator. It's one of their new products, one of their new immersion chillers, which is a really phenomenal chiller. I've been using the Jaded Hydra for a long time, but I've had issues kind of fitting it into the Brewzilla, the 35-liter version. And so Accelerator reached out to me, sent me one of their products, and it works fantastic. To be quite honest, I can't tell a difference in chilling times. Granted, I didn't do a side-by-side, but just off of experience, I think it holds its own with Jaded, and Jaded being, to me, the homebrewing gold standard for chillers. The Accelerator unit, which I will have a link down in the description below for you to check out. I don't get any kickback. They didn't pay me to make this. They don't even see this before uploading. They just sent it to me for me to use. Fits really well for the unit, the Brewzilla Gen4 that I'm using. Chilled that down as far as that'll get me. Usually gets me about 678-ish degrees. Put that in my fridge until the fridge brought it down to pitching temperatures. Brought this down to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a little higher than I use even for an English strain. And I pitched 2 packets of Verdant IPA from Lallemand, which I've been using a lot more dry yeast lately. Dry yeast has come leaps and bounds since I started homebrewing, which really was only 5 or so years ago. And it's great. I'm a huge, huge fan of London Ale 3 by Yeast 1318. It's been the initial hazy IPA strain that I used when I homebrewed. I've used some version of that even commercially. It's just been it's been a go-to yeast strain for me. I think it gives a creaminess, it gives like an ester profile that I really, really enjoy for a hazy IPA. I oxygenate it, even though I think you're not supposed to. I have a hard time not. So pitch it at 68, 4 days into fermentation. So this is still active. It's kind of ripping. I hit it with an ounce of Citra and an ounce of Nelson. 6 days into fermentation. So 2 days later, I hit it with 5 ounces of Nelson and 3 ounces of Citra. So this is a double dry hopped Hazy Double IPA for a total dry hop amount in 4.5 gallons of 10 ounces. This is about 4.5 to 5 pounds per barrel rate for any commercial brewers watching this. After I added the second dry hop, I put a spunding valve on the corny keg and set it for 10 psi. Day 7, I set it for 70 degrees, and on day 10, crashed it down to 32 degrees. In day 11, I transferred or racked off this beer from the fermenter into a serving keg. For a Hazy Double IPA, 15 days old, well, 15 days since brew day, this thing is drinking really nice. It did have a lot of grain character, that harshness, that almost astringency from dry hopping it so much. It needed a few days to cool off. It had a little bit of like heat to it also, but that has since faded. It is a little bitter, and I will say, like I said in the recipe development, to dial back the initial hopping at 75 minutes to about maybe 20 to 30 IBU. I was overestimating the body and sweetness that the alcohol, the higher alcohol at 8% would give, and I would dial back the initial bitterness a little bit. Otherwise, I do think the bitterness present in this Hazy Double IPA does help it be more drinkable, along with mashing at a lower to me than temperature in the mash. One, attenuated a little more for a little bit of extra bump, and it also didn't make it so damn heavy. I normally like making my hazy single IPAs finish around 10-16, 10-18, because I do feel that sweetness and that added body helps with drinkability, and that's the hazy IPA style that I prefer. And so when I was making the double, I wanted to make sure I still got that body, but I still added the drinkability factor when you couple it with being 8%. And I think if I were to mash at 156-ish, that this would just be too heavy. Got my handy dandy tasting notes here. Leave me a comment down below if you're a huge Nelson fan like me. For the aroma on this beer, I'm getting stone fruit. I tried to be more specific, but I just can't. I personally can't pick it out. Even have my wife, who really helps me kind of put these together sometimes. We just get stone fruit, not overripe, not underripe, stone fruit. I get mango, and I get grapefruit. Not grapefruit zest, not the rind, grapefruit. So aroma, stone fruit, mango, grapefruit. Taste. You get punched in the face with Nelson, and all that is Nelson. Now, I will say these are from Yakima Valley hops. If you purchase hops or you care about the quality of your hops and you don't purchase yours from Yakima Valley hops, I've yet to find a better supplier. I've been purchasing that from them for about 5 years now, and I've partnered up with them as well. If you're interested in getting $20 off your $100 order, which is 20% your first order, make sure to use code HOPKILLER, all one word, and you'll get that. Shameless plug for me, I really don't get much kickback, but you get high quality hops. That's where I get all my hops from. I feel like that's where you should get your hop from, regardless if you use my code or not. Quality hops. To say all that, I do feel this Nelson is a little diesel-y and less gooseberry. Outside of the tasting Nelson character that it has, I get those sugary dried mango pieces. Get a lot of that, and like a candied orange. And mouthfeel, this has a lot to do with the grain bill. This has a lot to do with the finishing gravity, pretty much all, and a pH, I think, too, as well. I get a creamy, pillowy mouthfeel, not too heavy, and it finishes well. And I think that bitterness, again, really helps with the finish and really helps with drinkability. I hope you got some value out of this video, and I hope you brew this recipe. If you do brew the recipe, make sure to let me know. If you got any value out of this video, please leave a like, a comment of some sort, and subscribe if you want more brewing related content. Hazy Double IPA, double dry hopped, Nelson. All right, I'll see you later.